Hello everybody, and welcome to my next Warden tank build video. I had done one around Dragon Bones, and hadn't had a chance to put one together for Somerset, so I'm going to try to take the time now to make one here for Wolf Hunter. I'll be going through several different kind of combinations and variations on this build for trials, for dungeons, a couple different options and set ideas for you and different skills based on different scenarios. It is, I found this to be very enjoyable, and so far at least it's worked for me pretty well in all of the content that I've been running, vet trials and vet dungeons and things like that. So a nice build if you want to be able to run 4-man content without a healer, or with a healer, it's up to you. And obviously vet trials main or off tank can provide that for you. So let's jump into it here, and let's talk about some of the things here that we're looking at. We'll look at the character sheet here for you. We have here on the character sheet, as you can see, basically our main stats here to look at, primarily into health and a little bit into stamina. This is with food on, no warhorn, as you can see, just slightly higher magic than stam. And when we buff everything up, we have a pretty decent overall setup. This is the skill setup. It was basically set up for a trials main tank setup. I've made notice from my previous build a little bit less magical recovery. I will get into that because of a skill later on. Slightly higher physical resist, but overall this works, I find, pretty well. And especially when buffed with minor toughness, you're looking at well over 40k. I am running the Lord. I pretty much stuck with that since I've switched over to it, and I've been enjoying that a lot. And I am a vampire and running Tri-Stat food. Okay, let's take a look at champion points. Champion points don't really vary for me between trials and dungeons, so these are the same setup regardless. We'll take a look at the green tree, most interesting one. I have about 21 points into bashing focus. Do a lot of bashing as a tank, so obviously that's beneficial. And I have a few points into tenacity and a few points into magical recovery. I've considered some points into stamina recovery, but I've decided against it, primarily magic recovery and tenacity for those few times that I am doing some heavy attacks in there. Get a little bonus. The Shadow, I am running 91 points currently into Shadow Ward. I may bump that up the last 9. I put a few points in there from before. And a few points into Tumbling. There are several fights where dodge rolling is definitely beneficial, so I find that to be an effective use of some of those extra points there. I know a lot of tanks who are running 100 points into Shadow Ward. I know some that are running just the one to get 24%, 81 or something like that. So it's definitely a matter of preference and play style. So I find this to be pretty effective for me in this setup right now, and I might bump it up to 100 at some point, but we'll see. Blue Tree, probably the least interesting. 71 to Elfborn, 75 into Blessed. As a Warden, you have a lot of magic-based heals, so having the Elfborn definitely helps make those heals pretty effective. I've seen heals from my tank do 16k crits on heals with some of this stuff. It's definitely been helpful. Physical Weapons Expert and Mastered Arms, this is really just some fluff points here. I could throw these and put 100 and 100 in there, but a little extra DPS isn't terrible. And I've got a few points into Precise Strikes because there are times where I will run Vigor as a stamina-based heal, and so having that extra little burst in there is pretty good. I probably could do a little bit of my Blue Tree, but so far I've kind of not been unhappy with it. On to the Red Tree. This is the big one people like. 72 into Ironclad, 5 into Spell Shield, 56 into Hardy, 49 Elemental Defender, 44 Thick Skin. Now, I have more into Hardy than I do into Elemental Defender because a lot of what really hits hard for Wardens, in particular over DKs, are physical attacks. As lacking a class-based damage shield, aside from the range shield only, straight up physical heavy attacks are a little tougher, and so that's why I have a few more points into Hardy over Elemental Defender for things like the Warrior and Pinnacle Factotum, other things that just have really heavy physical heavy attacks, or situations where you can't always dodge roll. Putting a little more into that is beneficial. 20 into heavy armor focus. Again, that's just to give us that nice little uptick over our magic resistance, to give us a little more there. And 14 into quick recovery. As an Argonian, I'm already getting some bonuses to my healing receive, but this extra almost 4% really kind of helps provide that extra little bonus to make both my heals and the heals that are coming to me from other healers and other sources more beneficial. That's my setup there. Feel free to leave any comments in the comment section if you have suggestions about how you would set up yours differently. Alright, I want to talk just briefly about some passives and the passive abilities that you're going to want in general for tanking. These are universal. It's not like I changed these out based on my skill and where I'm at. Bond with nature. So we're in the animal companions tree of the Warden, the first one. So this is most all the pets and everything like that. Bond with nature. Whenever you summon or a pet is unsummoned, you are restored 1500 health. So that applies to your netch. So when your netch goes away, you get a little health tick. It's kind of nice. You know, definitely a benefit there. Activating Savage Beast. Active Animal Companion grants 4 ultimate 8-second cooldown. So if you're sitting there and you're in combat, mind you, this only works when you're in combat, and you pop that pet, you're going to get an extra 4 ult, which doesn't seem like a lot, but over the course of the fight can definitely add up and something you want to definitely take advantage of. And Flourish is a big standard that I think you're going to want to have. Increase your magic and stamina recovery by 12% if you have an animal companion ability slotted. I know several tanks who will purchase the bear, the feral garden, and put it on their front bar for the bonus recovery. I prefer the max magic personally, and I'll run the netch on my back bar for the bonus recovery there, but I mean, it's definitely an option to consider and have available for you. All the passives in the green balance, the healing tree, are beneficial. When you heal an enemy or a warden yourself or an ally under 40% with the green balance ability, gain major mending, increasing your healing number by 25% for 3 seconds. So don't forget, green balance are the skills that are come out of this tree. So you've got to make sure you're paying attention to how you're using that to gain that major mending for those 3 seconds. But when it happens, it's definitely a beneficial thing. Don't forget, Leeching Vines is considered a heal from the green balance, so if you take a big hit, it'll heal immediately after that, and that will then give you that major mending, making the rest of your heals a little stronger. When you heal somebody with the green balance ability, you gain 250 magic or stamina, whichever resource pool is lower, once a second. So basically free extra magic return or stamina depending on your setup, but for most tanks, and stamina is going to be higher, be more magic, and so definitely a way to keep your magic high since there's a lot of magic skills in this build. Emerald Boss, again, healing done, increase that by 2% for every green balance ability slotted. Not so much in a tanking scenario for trials, but in dungeons in particular, when you're running a couple of these in your front bar and 1 or 2 on your back bar, that extra 4% can definitely help, because don't forget, you're going to have a lot of green balance abilities. And maturation. Notice it is 10 seconds of minor toughness whenever you heal. Notice it is heal yourself or anybody. There's specific wording here about green balance abilities on the rest of these. As you can see, there's not that on maturation. So any heal grants minor toughness. So very useful to have that available and leveled up. Winter's Embrace. This is the Warden skill line for Frosty, Magic-y, DPS/tankiness. Glacial Presence, increases in applying Chilled. Chilled is the ice status effect that does minor maim, minor 15% damage reduction. So when you apply things like Frozen Device damage, when you apply Gripping Shards, Northern Storm, anything that does damage, you have a chance to increase the amount you do by 200% with that, which is pretty nice. Increase your physical spell resistance by 500 for each Winter's Embrace ability slotted. Now, this is huge because it plays to the strength of set up a build like this. Notice I've got 4 skills on, including my ultimate, so that means I get an extra 2,000 resistance from this. Now, obviously, as the build changes, I have to adjust some things, but that extra resist is huge and help make sure that you're getting close to that cap. And especially if you're newer to tanking, you want a high resistance to be able to make sure you're not getting caught by things too readily. I've tanked stuff in 25k resistance before, so I'm not saying you can't do it with lower resistances. But starting off, and especially as you're learning new content, having a higher resist definitely helps you in that scenario. I see aura effectiveness of snares applied to you by 15%, so if you get snared, helps reduce that a little bit. Can't complain too much about that. Piercing Gold I've got a point in, but, you know, it's damage, so it's not as essential. Sword and Shield passives, all of them are obviously beneficial. You want every single one of these. Decrease the stamina cost, your abilities, and cost of blocking by 36, huge. Increase damage you can block by 20%, huge. Bashing does more damage and costs less stamina, huge. Deflecting the damage you can block from projectiles by ranged attacks by 15%, huge. Also, when you consider the fact that you're combining that with your Shimmering Shield, means that it takes less damage, wonderful. And Battlefield Mobility, a huge benefit that makes your tank able to actually do things while blocking. All those passives important. Destruction Staff. A lot of people I know, you know, so obviously Trifocus is important. Does the taunt. I know some tanks who don't do this. They don't want the Magicka block. They want to have other options. I like it, especially for being able to swap back and forth, having such an even magic stand pool. I'm a big fan of it for the taunt. Be able to use that. Elemental Force. I will sometimes run Crushing Shock for certain scenarios on my tank for interrupting ads and things like that. So being able to apply status effects is nice. And Ancient Knowledge reduces the cost of blocking and amount you can block. Basically the same passive as the Sword and Board. So definitely pick those up. Take advantage. For the armor passive, since I'm running 511, I put some points into all three of these first ones. Get a little extra resist, a little extra reduction, and a little extra magic recovery. And medium armor, the only one that's really beneficial here is the Windwalker for the stamina recovery and stamina reduction, since they combine those into one option. I could run athletics. I've thought about it. I haven't put any points in there yet. Heavy armor, all of them. Extra physical resist, yes. Extra recovery I get from that, and magic stamina recover based on my piece of armor, yes. Max health for sure. Increase how much my heavy attacks restore, yes. And healing received, yes. Yes across the board for all those things. Definitely pick them all up. Vampire is, you know, obviously there's the supernatural recovery, extra 10%. That's one of the main reasons why people are vampires right now, is the extra recovery bonus. And Undeath, as you lose health, you get more damage mitigation. So especially if it's a dot or things like that, or you get knocked down to 20%, it's going to be a lot harder to take you down to that last step. Finally, I pick up health unnatural resistance just to keep my health recovery from being too wild. Most of the time I sit at stage 3 vampire in most fights. There's no benefit to go to stage 4. You need stage 3 to have Undeath, so keep that in mind. Intimidating Presence and Persuasive Will are great for questing. Here in the Psijic Order, Clairvoyance, reduce the cost of my Psijic Order abilities, big benefit. Concentrated Barrier, the shield, and then obviously the Major Protection is nice. Undaunted, get all the passives. Undaunted Command, when you pop a synergy, get resources back. As a tank, you're popping synergies often. And again, the Undaunted Metal. This is the one where the 511, having heavy, medium, and light armor all equipped, gives me 6% more resources. To me, a lot about tanking is a resource game, managing your resources effectively while doing all your buffs and debuffs, and so having more resources helps me manage them. No Assault. Support passives. Magicka 8 is nice. When you have slotted, say, a Purge or Guard, Purge in particular, to get that extra magic recovery. Some tanks will run Barrier on their front bar for the extra magic recovery, but I found it not to be necessary. And I am an Argonian. I like to swim fast, so that's a big benefit for it. In particular, the Potion passive, getting an extra 5k resources. When I pop a potion, it just makes my potions exceptionally powerful. And max health, poison disease resist, which is nice, and then quick to receive, healing done, and healing received by 5%. Those are all the main passives. Other ones you're going to definitely want to make sure you have. Medicinal use makes your potion results last longer, so the recovery benefits of your potions are a big deal. And in provisioning, I don't have it, but a lot of people like to run the Gorbon, duration of your food. If you want to have that available, is also beneficial, but definitely the alchemy one for sure you want to pick up. And those are a little bit about the passives that we run in here. All right, let's talk about skills for trials and tanking, particularly main tanking is this current setup, but generally speaking we'll talk about other skills you can use for off tanking as well for trials. Shimmering Shield is a great skill. Any ranged adds that you might face off against, Dreadstalkers, the spheres from VHOF, any number of adds that you may face, or bosses like in Ruins of Mazatun the Hashmoda, or Falkreath Hold, the final Minotaur boss. Anything that's a ranged attack, Shimmering Shield is the way to go. You can absorb almost 60k damage, absorbs tons of damage. VRC, Vet Cloud Rest, the last boss, Zamaj, her heavy attack, I use this and I take maybe a couple thousand points of damage when she does that heavy attack projectile. It's great, it's wonderful, and it does some great stuff. It also, the one we're using Shimmering Shield here, gives us the major heroism. So you get a huge ulti generation out of this. You'll get a total of 12 ultimate every time you pop one. So a great way to build some extra resources from that. When I'm not dealing with a ranged add or I have a big heavy attack, I'll typically run Bone Surge. 30% of my max health is roughly around a 12k damage shield for me in PvE content, which is really nice. And then obviously the Spinal Surge ability, giving that 100% damage shield to 3 allies, can be a huge benefit, as well as the major vitality for them. So kicker here is it costs stamina, so it's not something you can keep up 100% of the time. You've got to know your fight and know when it's worth utilizing to have available for you. Pierce Armor, pretty standard for all tanks. Taunt and Major Fracture, Major Breach. Great skill, also applies your weapon enchant, so pretty standard. Utilize it all the time. Deep Thoughts. This is one of my newest additions to my setup here, and one of the reasons why I've gotten away from having a really high recovery setup. I still run some recovery jewelry, as you saw, but this Deep Thoughts is really beneficial. You can sit there and restore 2k of each resource every second. It basically increases your recovery by 4,000 when you can run it for a couple seconds at a time. Now, it's important to understand that, you know, when you do these things, it's really cool and can give some really great beneficial things down for you. But the big kicker here is that, you know, just watch that recovery, watch that magic just pop right up. Look at it go. How fast you get it back with that on. Is that you're not blocking while you're doing this. As you can see, I'm not blocking, and so what that means is I'm going to be sitting here able to get stunned by an attack. I'm able to get knocked back. A lot of things can happen. So it's not something you can just, you know, sit there. And I might sit in a dungeon or for long periods of time and just sit here like this is a joke, but you can get knocked down, and then you got to spend stam to get back up quickly. So it's very important that you know when you can use Deep Thoughts, but it's a great skill. I use it a lot, for example, in Vet Cloud Rest. When the Griffin goes up in the air, when I'm taking the Griffin, I'll stand off to the side for 4 or 5 seconds, let my resources top off. Pinnacle Factotum, sometimes I'll do it right after a heavy attack. You know, you got to kind of time it to know what you're doing, but you can definitely take advantage of this skill to give you that benefit, and it has definitely been a huge aspect. Now, it's not like you're totally blind. You'll have major protection, which we'll talk about in the Psijic Order skill line. Due to the Psijic Order passive down here, you have major protection while you're running it, so it's not like you're completely knocked out. But by also having that on your bar, you also get a free damage shield. Psijic Order slot in your blocking, you get a free damage shield. That's that bubble right there. Extra 5k that you can utilize periodically. So Deep Thoughts, definitely recommend it. Psijic Order is really not bad, especially to do with some friends. You definitely want to utilize it, and it's a toggle, so it's on, and you can block out of it. So as you can see, I'm holding here, immediate into block, back up, immediate into block. So it definitely provides some benefit from that perspective. Polar Wind is my kind of self-burst heal on my front bar. I use this skill pretty frequently as a way to give myself a burst heal, 70% of my max health. You know, I'm running, you know, over 40k with minor toughness, running pretty much non-stop on this Warden. So I'll be having, you know, 70% of that. I'm almost looking at an 8k base. That's before all of my healing done and healing received benefits, and then obviously it's a heal over time of another roughly 5k 4k base plus my other healing, and then also can heal an ally. So in those rare situations where you've got to heal, maybe another tank's holding the dude and gets hit pretty hard, you can pop it and heal them with that, which is effective. Gripping Shards is my root and my main source for minor maim and Frost. You know, a lot of folks, if they're running the Asylum or the Elemental Weapon setups, give you a lot of strong options for having concussion and minor maim up anyways, but I like to have this ability available for that, and it's an AoE root, which is really nice. You know, once it immobilizes them for 3 seconds, then slows the movement down. Great for controlling adds in the area. Ultimate on the front bar is Northern Storm. Biggest advantage here is the max magic, increasing my max magic by 8%. This allows me to slot a little more into Stam and still keep a high magic pool and keep them very, very close together, which is a great benefit. And then obviously the major protection from me and nearby allies. You can couple this with a Nova. Novas do major maim, reducing the damage enemy does, excuse me. And combined with this, major protection means that your group can take almost no damage. I've used this a lot in situations like in VHOF Pinnacle Factotum, where I've got both the Centurion and the boss, and I might go into splits or steam comes out, I'll pop that just to kind of help myself stay up through a lot of that, because it can get kind of wild at certain points. So, you know, you're typically going to keep this mostly for the passive, for the extra max magic, but in case you need it for other things, it's going to be definitely helpful for you. On to the back bar, we've got Ice Fortress, which is our major ward, major resolve, and the minor protection, reducing your damage taken by at least 8%. So minor free mana protection, pretty much up 24 seconds all the time. Huge benefit. And don't forget, this also gives you and 5 other of your best friends this, as long as they're nearby. Range is 8 meters, so it's not like they're right nearby, but for those Stam DPS, give them an extra 5,000. Resist can be a big bonus, so it's a big help. Leeching Vines. Leeching Vines obviously cast in front of you and will heal you for every time you take damage, so kind of a little bit of damage mitigation, but will apply lifesteal to everyone that attacks you. So this lifesteal is the big thing here, right? You know, you apply it to the boss, apply it to yourself, then the boss hits you, and then they're taking minor lifesteal. So for 10 seconds, everyone in the group's getting an extra, basically 1,400 health recovery, right? The 700 over 2 seconds. So you're getting a free heal over time. This also will proc, the minor health steal from this will proc the minor toughness on everybody. So that's a big benefit, that you can apply that minor toughness to the whole group effectively, and provide that heal. And give back that little heal to yourself as well. It's important to recognize that when you're doing this, you've got to turn away for a second. So if I'm tanking the boss over here and I go pokey, I do a quick spin while I'm doing my buffs and do like this, so that way everything's set up, and then I come back to face the boss again. If you face towards the group, it's more likely going to go on some DPS or something, so it'll be a little tougher that way. Now, again, Leeching Vines, great skill. Deceptive Predator. As you can see, provides a speed buff. This is our main speed buff skill. Gives us that speed for 14 seconds, which is really nice. Extra stam recovery, which when on our ice staff bar isn't bad, or when we're not holding block on our sword and board bar. And then the minor evasion, dodge chance 5%. 5%'s not, that's kind of just an added bonus. I've had a couple of cool moments where I'm like, oh, I dodged that heavy attack. But for the most part, it's not humongously crazy. It really is the main setup here for me at this point, is how I run that. And the speed buff is really beneficial when having to do a moving fight, like the first boss of VHOF or the twins in VMAW, things like that. Frozen Device. This is our primary chain rooting ability. You throw these down on the ground, enemy gets pulled in and immobilized, takes some damage, and reduces minor maim. They added the damage component, which I think is really useful, because that means that the enemy's not just going to run away from you immediately. If you can get them taunted pretty quick, then you'll have that kind of initial damage-based aggro, which is really helpful on a lot of ad situations. The major maim is huge. 4 seconds of minus 30% damage by just pulling them in can be really helpful. Don't forget, it arms after 1.5 seconds, so you're going to throw this down, and that 1.5 seconds is that time there that it takes for it to appear. Notice this isn't a cast time, so I can block cancel this, and I can start a second one while the first one's going. So if I've got multiple ads, let's say over here in this corner, I can just lay down 2 or 3 here at once, and they'll all be up and ready to go at the same time, which is pretty helpful. Again, just look at that magic recovery. Deep Thoughts is just really good. So Frozen Gate, very useful. Been a big help for ad management and things like that. Bullnetch, still around, still running it. Still like it a lot. I like it on my back bar where I'm kind of working through my buffs, get a little extra recovery by having the netch on there. But again, that's that passive skill over time. It just sits there, does that. It also gives a little burst heal, which is kind of cool. But I really like it for that benefit of what it does. So between that and Deep Thoughts, I get a lot of stand back pretty regularly. And if I have to block for a long period of time, the netch helps kind of mitigate that. It's only 7 seconds. Finally, Aggressive Warhorn. Again, pretty standard. Max magic, max stand, minor toughness, 30 seconds. And obviously the major force for 9.5 seconds, which is pretty critical for a raid group. This is the main ultimate you're going to be using almost all the time. And you're going to want to have that handy and available to run with. Some other skills that I have slotted in the past, when there's not any ads I have to deal with. Vigor is always a nice little option. It's a stand-based heal, so you have to kind of be careful with how you use it. Purge, obviously, is a standard one for certain fights you'll need to have available. An efficient purge I'd recommend. 5k magic's pretty expensive even for us. Orbs, always nice. Throw in orbs out for everybody, extra free heals. Every 1k a second, basically like an extra recovery. But then obviously the health burst and the magic stam can be a big benefit for there as well. Silver Leash is one that they have changed and updated, where you can use this basically as a pull. It works kind of similar to chains, does a little bit of a stun when they get pulled in. And I've liked it. I've been testing it a little bit. It does cost stamina, so it's a little something to get used to, as most of my abilities are magic based, but I've been playing around with it, like on VMAL Twins, and kind of seeing how it works. I've been enjoying that as well. Absorb Magic is something I may slot on my front bar for certain range fights or really heavy fights where I need to take a lot of damage and have that passive mitigation there. Rakat on the last boss of VMAL. Pinnacle Factotum, I'll sometimes slot this. Not really for the skill, but for the passives, the extra 8% damage mitigation. Axes, things like that, it's worth having available. So, Growing Swarm is a ranged dot that I sometimes use in ESO as well. So, definitely some different skill options available. There's more than one way to skin a cat, so I definitely recommend you play around and look at some other skills that exist and see kind of what you like. I know some folks will run maybe Ellie Drain. Elemental Blockade's very popular for a lot of tanks, so feel free to explore what different options you've got available and how you want to play your build and your role. Alright, now let's talk a little bit about inventory, and gear. Now this is, like I said, a main tank setup, so this is the setup that I typically will run as the main tank in a trial environment. We're running Alkosh. Currently I'm still running a Crusher infused on the main hand for my front bar. I've been toying around, particularly on my Dragon Knight, running it on the back bar with the Wall of Elements or some other class-based skill to keep it up at a different level, but haven't changed over yet. And particularly for other scenarios like dungeons and stuff, it's a little bit different. But running that right now. Reinforced Alkosh Shield. I probably could get away with making this infused, but haven't spent the trade gems yet on it. So I'm board of Alkosh. I am running Ice Staff on the back bar. I know a lot of folks enjoy the Lightning Staff option, something to consider. I've really found the benefits of being able to block with magic when necessary to be very helpful. In case I ever need to swap around for it. Alkosh obviously is a pretty standard tank setup, the main reason being this physical and spell resistance. As you can see, it does a little bit of damage. It's nice for AoE aggro control, if you can get in there and pop that synergy early around the enemies for ads, but really it's that extra 3,000 physical spell resistance that is very popular. You're looking at almost a 10%, 8 or 9% increase in damage for all of your DPS with that, and is very helpful to have available, especially with the new synergy cooldowns. So that'll be something to consider. The Ice Staff also allows me not have to slot a range taunt with very few exceptions. It keeps me able to use this as necessary. So definitely something to get used to. I'm still running Lord Warden. I've been enjoying that a lot. As you saw, prismatics on both the shield and the head here. I love Lord Warden. It's great. That orb is wonderful for that extra resist and for other allies. If you position yourself well, you might be able to get some stamina there with it. It's definitely helpful from that perspective. Then the extra 3k base physical resistance gets you up pretty high. This right here puts me well above cap in both physical and spell resistance, so that helps a lot from that perspective. Doing that for head and shoulders. I'm running a light shoulder in this scenario. I like to run 511 because I enjoy the extra Undaunted passive, and we'll talk more about that later on. For my second 5-piece set, I'm running Gallonway. Again, as you can see, infused prismatic on all my big pieces. Gallonway is pretty great. So Minor Aegis, which I know gets a lot of flack for being a little underpowered, but 5% is nothing too shabby to shake your head at. 4% more healing taken. Again, very beneficial in trials, especially with there being a lot of healing debuffs going around. And the empowering 3 nearest allies. There are certain scenarios, as people will mention, where your allies may not always get that. You know, the DPS might not because if it hangs too close or something like that. But I found that it helps pretty well, and especially if you're tanking multiple adds or blocking those heavy attacks, it does provide that extra damage boost to your team. Another option, of course, is always to run Eben. If your group has an off-tank that's running some other sets, Eben is a great option, obviously, and pretty standard, which you can get from that dungeon. Crypto Hearts. So, but for main tank, I'd like to run Gallonway, but Eben's also always a nice option for that. Mostly sturdy, small pieces, mix of different enchants, mix of health. You see a magic one there on the legs. Again, infused large pieces. Have my Alkosh here, another prismatic. I'm wearing one Alkosh body piece, as you can see here, and that is again to give me that medium armor. So I have that 5-1-1, 5 heavy, 1 medium, 1 light. Wearing obviously Alkosh jewelry. I'm currently still running 2 magic recovery enchants and 1 shield play enchant. I have changed over 2 of my runes to triune. I'm still running 1 robust just to kind of keep my stamina above over my magic. I'm keeping a high resource pool there. But I am running 2 triune. I really like the triune. It gives me a nice bonus of resources, an extra resource bonus, and keeps a little more spread out my resource needs, which is useful from that perspective. So that's my main gear for main tanking. In a scenario where I might off-tank, I would probably swap the Gallonway to Eben, which is a very useful set. And then other sets that I have run in the past for main tanking, Lunar Bastion has always been a nice one to provide some damage shield benefit for you and your allies. Gives that lunar, when you activate a synergy, which would pair with Alkosh, you're doing all the time. Also has Minor Aegis, and has basically the same benefits as Gallonway, just a little bit different. And for certain fight scenarios, Resilient Yokeda, but we'll get into that once we jump into gear. Mazatoon, I think, is also a great set that gets a little under wrap. As you can see, 1 of each stat type, health, magic, stam, and when you're under 30%, you basically get a free potion. 8,400 health and 6,000 stamina every 45 seconds. It's basically an extra free tri-stat potion. That is a great benefit for us. So those are some other tanking sets that I like to run, which I found to be pretty beneficial. Alright, let's talk a little bit about some setup options for dungeons, 4-man content. Now, this setup I find to be very beneficial when working with a healer or without a healer. Primarily without a healer is this setup. However, if your healer has enough set variety, you can run still this same setup and provide some greater diversity to your group. There are a couple of variations to this, and so I'll talk about the differences, particularly in set pieces that I have available based on my group composition and the dungeon I'm going into. Let's take a quick look at the character sheet difference here. Let's pop some of our skills real fast, so we have those handy. I want to point out a couple things. Notice our recovery is a bit higher. We have to self-sustain a little more, especially without a healer in dungeons than we do in trials. So we want to make sure we're able to do that. Stats, again, are a little bit lower in the health, in the magic stand department. Health sits around the same. You'll see a little bit about why that is in a second. And resist, notice, are a fair bit lower, only at about 25k when I don't have when my buff's active. Now, there are ways to get that up a little higher based on your sets that you're running. So if you are running some harder content, or your group maybe isn't necessarily at a super high burn level where you need to be able to take a little more damage output, then you can look at swapping that up. I don't change my Mundus. Mundus stays the same, food stays the same, all that stays the same for that. Moving on into these skill sections. I like to run Olarimes, or Olaremes. Again, infused, sword and board, and then ice staff on the back bar. Now, I only run my Olareme on my front bar. Let's talk about Olareme for a second. Minor Aegis, 5% damage reduction, huge benefit. Casting the ground effect abilities, Circle of Might on the ground for 10 seconds. Allies get Major Courage. Major Courage is the Spell Power Cure buff. So I used to run Spell Power Cure. I now run this. Two main reasons why I run this skill effectively. And again, the buff is for 30 seconds here, so when they step in it, they have it for a very long time versus Spell Power Cure, where I've got to be constantly keeping the heals up to keep it on them. This, it has a huge benefit. I don't have a target dummy in this house, unfortunately, otherwise I'd show you to you, but it is procs, as you can read here. It procs off of a ground effect ability in combat. So when I cast certain abilities, like my Gripping Charge, which is considered a ground effect ability, it will throw it on the ground. I also run a different healing skill, Budding Seeds, which is a ground effect ability, so I can control it. I only run this on one bar. As you can see, I have a different staff on my back bar, just a random ice staff that's defending, primarily because I want to control when it procs. I want to make sure it's throwing it on my group, so I know I can go my back bar, I can do my buffs, do all these things, and then swap my front bar, throw this heal down first, center it on the group so that I'm in the edge, right? I'm right here on the edge of it, and then, but the buff's right here behind the boss for the group to stand in and get that big buff. It's a huge benefit, and again, I said, even if you have a healer in the group, have them run something like Infallible Aether and Mending or something. It takes some getting used to run Olareme over something else, but it's definitely, I found to be very effective, and that Minor Aegis with the 2 magic recovery is nice. Spell Power Cure I like on the back bar because the 2-piece max magic gives a little more magic to work with, making those initial heals better. For Monster Helm, I run the Earth Gore. Healing Done's nice, makes my heals a little stronger, and then obviously I always have a joke that say Earth Gore saves lives. It really does. Even with the change to it being over 6 seconds instead of 3, it still is a massive heal, a massive burst that can keep people alive, and save wipes, save deaths, do all sorts of good things. I've seen this save all sorts of lives in a variety of content, including my own when I've made mistakes. So definitely a great helm, and with all of the healing over time you're throwing out there with your lifesteal, with your Budding Seeds, with all these skills you're throwing out there with heals, it's going to proc, so take advantage of it. The other set I've been running recently is Livewire. Now, I swap between this Gallenway and Resilient Yokata. Now, Resilient Yokata is great, as you all know, because of the resistances. There's a max health, and then when you're blocking every 10 seconds, you get a big burst of heal based on the number of enemies you're blocking. In dungeons, you're typically tanking a few more enemies, so this can easily become a 20k heal when you've got 4 or 5 adds on you. There are a couple of new sets that do similar things that I haven't yet played around with. ESO Warden, I believe it is, does one. That's a 5k over 5 seconds, just a flat 5k regardless, but a slower cooldown, so just more active heals. But I've stuck with Resilient mostly also because it also gives that 3k resistance. So again, if you're having issues tanking, physically actually taking the damage, Resilient's a great option. Not only does it heal you, keep you alive, but that extra 3k resistance when it's golded out gives you a nice bonus, puts you in that 20k, 28k range for that. Livewire, on the other hand, does not give me any resistance bonuses. In fact, 2 of its 4 options are healing taken, so it increases the amount of healing I receive by a total of 8%, and a health tick. Again, this is one of the reasons why our stats are a little lower. Between that and Olareme, there's not a lot of max stat bonuses. See, this has 2 recovery bonuses instead. So not a lot of max stats here, 1 max health, but take a look at that 5-piece set, which is kind of cool. When I take damage, which is all the time, 25% chance, which means it's going to happen pretty much instantly when you think about how many adds you're tanking at one time. Apply concussion to all enemies within 8 meters of you. Concussion is minor vulnerability, increases the damage these enemies take by 8% for 4 seconds. Also means that if someone's wearing a lightning staff, you can take the damage and make them off balance, which increase the damage stamina DPS do by 10%. So concussion, and again, applies to all enemies within 8 meters of me. So everyone I've grouped up gets minor concussion. It's not just one person at a time, as if I was single applying it with a weave or something like that. And every enemy that I hit with it heals me for 1,000 points. So again, 4 or 5 enemies, 5k heal. That's base before you add on the other elements. It can occur once every 8 seconds. Again, 25% chance. You're like, oh, it's not too high. But when you think about how often you're taking damage, anytime you take a dot, that's considered damage. A tick from a dot, a physical attack, an AoE you're standing in, and all of that counts. So it'll pretty much proc on cooldown most of the time, which means you have a 50% uptime at minimum on concussion for minor vulnerability. If no one's wearing infallible Aether, or you don't have a Asylum build in your group, or if you're running with a couple of stamina and no Sork in the group, Livewire is a great option to give that extra minor vulnerability. It also heals you, which is nice, and you don't have to be blocking to apply this, just when you take damage. So I've been enjoying it. I run it in Dragonstar Arena a lot, and I found it to be very beneficial at helping with the burn in that 4-man content. Sturdy small pieces, again, pretty typical. I'm running a light here. I'm running 5.2 in this setup. I really probably should get a medium shoulders for this from Earthgore, but I haven't yet. So I'm running 5.2, and then I've got shoes of Olarim again. Those are my shoes. Are always wearing my prismatic enchants for whatever reason. 2 jewelry pieces. Notice I've got 1 arcane, 2 triune again, and then 2 magic recovery, 1 block cost reduction. I've toyed around with running a 2 block cost and 1 magic recovery, and I've been potentially looking at a harmony on an Alkosh piece or an infused with something. Just haven't had a chance to really play around too much with it yet. So that's the gear setup. Some other gear options that we talked about before. Imperium is a great set, especially if your group needs a little more survivability. Every 15 seconds you get a damage shield, 12k base, which is nice. Definitely throw that out there. We talked about resilient Yokeda, which is beneficial. Other sets that are kind of nice. Spell Power Cure is always a good fallback if you can't get Olarim quickly. As long as you're healing people, it's going to give them that major courage for 10 seconds, which is nice. And if you have a healer, you could run Alkosh. I'm not a big fan of Alkosh in dungeons personally, but it's just hard to keep the uptime high on it, so I'd rather run something else. But I really like the Olarim Livewire combo right now. Alright, let's take a look at skills. Most of our skills stay the same between dungeons and trials, but there are a few differences. Again, Shimmering Shield, Pierce Armor, Deep Thoughts, all the same there. Budding Seeds, this one's a big one. So Budding Seeds can be a massive benefit I find for everybody. So first of all, it's a synergy heal. There's a synergy burst heal. Or not burst, a synergy dot heal. That's nice. And notice that I'm only at 20k magicka and it's already a 6k heal base. The Budding Seeds version is very nice because you can insta proc it after the first round. So I throw that down, which again, this procs Olarim. And then I can pop it again immediately to give the burst, or I can leave it there and then right after that heavy attack let it go off. Kind of just control when it happens. Just got to keep it down all the time, but it's pretty low ultimate cost. I also throw on Enchanted Forest up in the front. Gives that burst heal up front, and then as a heal over time. If the enemy is below 50% health, which is really the only time I ever use it, I generate ultimate. I get an extra free 20 ult, which is a nice benefit. When you combine that with the green balance element of this, where I get an extra 4% healing done with those 2 skills in my front bar, means that my heals, my self heals for myself and for the group become pretty potent. With Budding Seeds, it's really important to remember that you want to have this down ahead of time, and you want to be in it. So if I throw it over here, I'm still in it. You can see the edge of it right there. So you want to make sure that you kind of learn how far you can throw that in order for you to stay inside of that. Because if you throw it over here, for example, and you're outside of it, then ruh-roh, now you've got to relocate the boss and do all sorts of stuff. But definitely a nice thing for forming content. I'm going to start playing around with it in dungeons or trials, just haven't yet. On the back bar, Ice Fortress, all this is the same pretty much. Same setup, same set of skills that you might want to have available. Sometimes I'll have Ellie Drain handy for scenarios where I'll do that. If you decide to run a restoration staff on your back bar, Combat Prayer is a great option for the bonuses and the Minor Berserk. Minor Berserk's not as popular right now because there's so many Nightblades out there who are getting it passively through their other skills. But it's definitely worth having handy on that back bar. And again, those back bar skills stay pretty consistent and swap around as you need to. The only other skill that I would say that I didn't talk too much about from the Trials side, but is useful in dungeons, is Shielded Assault. Now, there is two scenarios, two fights that I have found so far. Ruins of Mazatoon, the last boss, and the second to last boss in Moonhunter Keep, where you have to actually stun the ad, not interrupt them. So most ads you just have to bash, and they'll stop doing whatever they're doing. There are two ads. The one in Mazatoon is in hard mode. Last boss is, I can't remember his name right now, but he shoots the golden things out of the ground. In order to get him out of that animation, you have to physically stun him. You can't interrupt or bash him. You have to physically stun him. Well, we don't have a natural stun like DKs do with their chain, so we have to use Shielded Assault. In Moonhunter Keep, you can bash the werewolves that are going into behemoth form to stop them, to slow down their ability to do that, and so again, Shielded Assault is beneficial for that. So that's one skill I didn't talk too much about, but I found to be helpful for those specific scenarios. Well, alright folks, thanks so much again for checking out my video build here on the Warden for Wolf Hunter. I will be making one probably when the new update comes out for Murkmire. I try to keep up with this a little more regularly than I have been in the past. We're still in just the first week of PTS for Murkmire, so we've got some time. But I don't predict too many massive changes. I definitely just take a look and see what we've got going on. But hope you enjoy it. Hope you find it beneficial. I really like playing a Warden, and I hope to see more people kind of explore and experience it. Very different play style, but it can be very rewarding. It can be a lot of fun once you master it. Thanks so much, and have a wonderful rest of your time.